Ollie Juaire loved blacksmithing and he loved to help others.
Very good.
He gave countless hours of his time to both the Guild of Metalsmiths and to the Northern Minnesota Metalsmiths.
Do you have a finished product that you're going to make? A hammer?
Today, we'll see examples of Ollie's background and work, his shop and his tools, his philosophy of life, and many anecdotes from it. We'll learn practical hints, learn about anvil repair and hammer making. So sit back, relax, and either meet for the first time or take time to remember Oliver Juaire.
Now, if you don't want that scale on there, you just knock it off with your finger flick.
So, Ollie, good morning.
Good morning to you.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about blacksmithing. You think this is a game worth getting into?
Well, I think so, because there's an awful lot of people that are interested in it. I got one woman yesterday, I went and bought about 25 or 30 coat hangers from her for a quarter. Because, see, what are you going to use them for? I says, for welding rods. She says, oh, I do welding too. She says, so I do copper. So we got talking. So I came home, it was just down here at Newport. Came home, I took my stuff, the latest model stuff that I made, went back down there, and she was at a garage sale, so she wasn't really busy, but she was part of the owners of the stuff that was there. And so she came over to the car and looked at it, and she was really interested, so I gave her a card, and we might have a new member. So by being a little bit forward and willing to talk to people that I've never seen before, ask them questions and find out something about them, and they find out something about me. Of course, I usually tell my story first. They don't have a chance.
Well, you know, come to think of it, Ollie, you and I met back in about 1984 or 85, I think it was.
Yeah.
Down there in Hastings.
Yeah, it was in, we were north, east of Hastings in Denmark Township.
That's right.
Through Davy's gravel pit.
That's.
And they were having a tractor pulling contest there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they had a little railroad train set up there, and they had, well, the first year I worked outside, and the second year they built a shed for me. And I think when we worked together, we were working in the shed.
It was brand new.
And brand new then, the first year.
Yeah.
There might be a plaque of when that was on the wall in there, in my shop.
Okay, I know I've got one or two of them myself from Denmark, from the, because it only ran 1 or 2 more years after
That's
that.
right. The fellow died, and then they couldn't divide up the money, and there was a lot of money there. So, because he had run in that gravel pit for a long time, and a trucking wreck, he had several, his kids driving truck for him, hauling gravel and sand and whatever else they had. And I don't know how many acres of land he had there, but he probably had 100 acres around in there.
Yeah, that was a nice outfit, but I certainly remember watching you for a little bit, and you getting me sucked right in there, beating on iron. That was a big day for me.
Well, I remember that I felt ashamed of myself afterward. I kept hollering at you, faster and harder, and your arm was hurting so that you could hardly move it.
And of course, I've had a chance to download that on other people since. Well, how did you get into blacksmithing, Ollie?
Well, when I sold out on the farm, I didn't have a job.
This is about when?
60. April 9th, I think it is, 9th or 10th of 1960. And I've been farming for 8 years, and the price of milk went down so low that I was selling it for less than what it cost me to produce it. So then I decided to have an auction, and I expected to get about $25,000 at my auction, and I forgot the exact figure, but it was under 20.
Wow.
When I ended up paying all my bills and paying Weber off, the owner of the farm, Well, this Ed Gerlach came over to my father-in-law's house, says, Ollie, you've got a job? I says, no. He says, how about coming and working for me? Gee, I said, I don't think I know enough about the business to do the work for you. We'll help you. I said, well, I can't start for a month because I got to install a barn cleaner for Earl Bolte. That'll be fine. The guy that's working for me wants to go and take over a filling station that's open up at Forest Lake, and that there's where he was from. He'd like to go back up there and take over the filling station. So he says, you can take his job. The first day on the job, after I installed the barn cleaner, he handed me a key. He says, you can come and go when you please. I said, that was complete trust in me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
I've never looked for a job in my life.
So now we got you working for Garrick's. What were you doing? I mean, were you, did he say you need a blacksmith or?
No. I repaired lawnmowers, and within a few months after I was there, or a year or so, I guess 2 years after I was there, I went to night school so I could learn weld. But I was doing general farm automobile repair and fixing tires and whatever job they wanted me to do. And then after I finished welding school, well then I was doing more of welding and that sort of thing.
What kind of equipment did they teach you on in welding school in 1960?
Well, they had us with much of it was book learning, and then we had small pieces of steel that we had to weld horizontally, vertically, and downhand and overhead and that sort of thing. And it was all those small pieces.
Was this buzz box kind of welders, or what did they have?
Yeah, on that.
Okay. Both DC and AC, did you learn there?
Well, I think they were just, I suppose they would do both. No, I was only going on the one welder.
Okay.
Well, we didn't have anything to do with setting them either.
Ah.
There were, I don't know how many lines come off. I've forgotten a lot of that because it's quite a while ago since I did some of that.
Sure.
I still got the books from it,
Uh-huh.
so I could go back and take
Well, I was just kind of wondering generally. And then did you also learn gas welding too? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But gas welding was, I think, a little easier to learn than the arc welding. And then I was working at the shop. I was starting to do gas welding by watching the old blacksmith. A lot of my training was just watching them. And, well, how come you did it this way? How come you did it that way? So sometimes he'd tell me, and sometimes he wouldn't talk, depending upon how he felt. And then he decided to retire after a couple of years. So I was going to leave that and go to another place uptown that was looking for a welder. And by this time I had finished welding school. So I sent a letter to him that I had done this year. I guess I took it up there. I think I wanted to talk to the people, so I took the letter up there. And he said, well, you could start working on Monday. So Monday and Tuesday went by and I never showed up. So they called me at the house and what happened? That you never showed up for work. I says, well, my boss says that I could go on a different situation and where I'd get 60% of whatever labor I turned in. And I says, it's close to my place. I like the man. He's a real good fellow, nice to work with. I think I'll stay where I'm at. As well, from the resume you gave us, we'd like to have you. So this is, I never looked for a job because when that fellow finished his month out and took over the place up at Forest Lake, I moved into the blacksmith shop. And the old fellow,
Ed Gerlich
yeah,
had the farm implement dealer company.
And so then I could make a lot more money because the harder I worked and the more I worked, the more money I made. So as I got better and was more accommodating to the customers than old George Marty was, because he'd be working for you and somebody would say, I'm going to Hastings, George. He'd take their stuff out of the fire, he'd throw his stuff down and he'd walk out and leave the customer set.
Well, Ollie, you know, I've heard over the years, you talking about this well drill point sharpening, bit sharpening. What, was Gerlich doing that by the time you got there, or how did you get into that?
George Marty, the old blacksmith, was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But he was only doing it for a few of the local drillers.
Mm-hmm.
He was good at it, he knew what he was doing, he knew how to temper. And so I'd watch him at noon hour when he'd be doing this. They'd bring him in maybe about 10 o'clock and say, well, come in after dinner, I'll have it ready for you. So in the meantime, during dinner time, I'd be eating my lunch back there in the shop instead of in the room with the rest of the fellas.
Mm-hmm.
Had kind of a little room off to the side where we have our lunch. And I'd watch him and I'd ask questions. And his eyesight was failing him. So after I got through art welding school, then it would have some small objects to weld. He couldn't see good enough, so he had me weld them for him. So one time, I said, what are you going to do now that Ollie's going to take over the blacksmith shop? He says, how are you and him going to get along? He says, Ollie's the only one that can take my place in the blacksmith shop. That was the biggest compliment I ever got from that guy in all my life. And
wow, that's great.
It was really meant a lot to me.
So when you then took over from him, did he have a complete set of this well bit sharpening equipment, or have you added to that over the years?
He didn't have any. He didn't have any.
Because you kind of automated that process a little, didn't you?
Well, I did. But as these blacksmiths in the Twin City area would quit doing well bits, getting old, and they quit, nobody else took their place. So you could send it to Leslie Company, and there was a number of well driller supply companies in St. Paul and Minneapolis. I think there's about 5 big ones. Then nobody took their place. So the fellows that have to get a local blacksmith or do it themselves or whatever they could, and they had no knowledge of it, so they were getting behind. They couldn't get well bits sharpened. They were using dull bits to drill holes. And when that happens, the hole gets smaller and smaller towards the bottom. The sides wear off. So then me and I had watched him do it, and with the help of a couple of drillers, Al Throne from Bayport was one, and he brought in a lot of bits. The first year that they started with that, and it got going good, I made, before they had started, I made $22,000 that year. Had a lot of money back before 1960.
Wow.
That was my gross.
Yeah.
The next year I made $18,000. The next year I made $16,000. The next year I retired.
Would you give any general advice to people who want to get into the blacksmithing business today?
Find somebody that's good enough to teach you. Don't try to learn it on your own. It takes so long to learn it on your own because you don't have any idea what's going wrong. You might find out that you did this here wrong or you did that wrong, but if you can eliminate those, it makes it a lot more interesting if you start turning out pieces of work within a week or so, or 2 weeks of intermittent training from different people, that you're able to produce something. Otherwise, you haven't any idea what you're doing wrong.
That's really good advice, Ollie. You know, Ollie, when we talked a little bit earlier, you talked about how you got into blacksmithing, and you did talk about how you had learned from the old blacksmith. When did you decide that you wanted to begin demonstrating your art in front of other people other than just while you were making a living?
When they started asking me.
And when was that?
When you and I were together down there at the tractor pulling
At
contest.
Denmark, huh?
At Denmark.
Okay, so that was about the first time.
That was the first demonstrations I ever made.
Okay. And kind of connect, that was in, we think, 84, 85, something like that, right? So had you been involved with the Guild of Metalsmiths at that time?
78 or 79 I joined.
So you started about the time the guild
They started in '76.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
There was, we got the Sunday paper, and there was a picture in one of the sections, I can't remember which, with Bob George doing some work at the Gibb farm.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife Mary saw it in the paper, and she says, "Oh, look, here's a blacksmith." So I read the article. She says, "You want to go?" I says, "Yeah." So we went and watched Bob George work at the Gibb farm. Paul Hubbard was there, and what was the other fellow's name? He's a real good blacksmith, but he's a real good drinker too. I can't say his name right now.
That's okay.
But he was, those three were demonstrating. And so I watched them work, and they were doing a good job. Paul was the quickest and probably the best of the artists.
Paul Hubbard at that time either?
And so I watched them, and I thought, gee, that'd be fun to turn out some of this here small stuff. That's when I started making like the bird, and it's out in the shop someplace right now, and like these things here that I made for, some of the early pieces are not dated.
Mm-hmm.
So then afterwards I start dating my stuff and putting my initials on it.
After you got a sense that there were these artists around, not just guys that fix things.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but I was already forge welding,
Uh-huh.
and I remember Bob Walsh, well, what I had done before I get into Bob Walsh, I went to a meeting at Bob Goddard. No? The one I lived up at the north end. Bob Sharp, he was the knife maker. So we went to a meeting up there, and what I did, I brought some of my work along. Plowshares in various stages of being repaired. Well, they're looking at the ceiling and counting flies on the wall because that wasn't no artist's job, so they didn't think much of it. I think it was Bob Walsh looked at it. Man, look at the size of that forge weld he made. They had never seen a forge weld that big because they were all working with this small stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, well, this is one of the hardest jobs I do, is sharpening plowshares. I says, I have to ask the farmer what kind of soil he's got. If it's real rocky, I don't want to temper them too hard because they'll snap. If it's very soft ground, I don't want to put too much suction on the plowshare, it'll go down to China. If it's real hard and dry, then I have to put more suction on the point of the plowshare so that it penetrates into the ground deep enough to what the farmer wants. So I says there's a lot goes into sharpening a plowshare that the average person don't see. So that was my first demonstration. I did not in front of people, but I brought the demonstrations first.
Sure, sure. Wow. That's great. Now, somebody told me about the average hair length on the blacksmiths back in about 1976. I think somebody said the average length of hair was 26 inches or something like that. Did most of those guys have long hippie type hair at that time?
Oh, yeah, the ones that joined the guild
Yeah.
were the ones that, yeah, they were all hippies. And what was happening, they could apply for a grant, and they could go to school and have a class and go, you know, they just get their money, and they probably spend it on beer, and they didn't spend it on haircuts, but they had to spend it on something else. And they were getting grants, so that was why they didn't think I was much of a blacksmith. They didn't think very much of me. It took almost 2 years before they realized that I was a blacksmith.
That there was
It was kind of a frustrating time for me because I didn't have hardly any artwork to show them. So I was making tools that were making money because I was working at the shop. I couldn't be making artwork, and I wouldn't be producing anything for my boss.
Yeah.
So the only time I did any artwork would probably be on noon hour. I'd work for 20 minutes or a half hour on some project, and that was just for my wife or for some of the other things that I made, like the paper towel holders and candle holders and this sort of thing. So then that got me started into it, and it was basically seeing Bob George working at the forge there. I probably would have continued as blacksmithing in the shop, but I wouldn't have gotten into the art work right away.
Sure.
So,
So how long did you work at Gerlich's then?
25 years,
And then, so you retired in what year?
85.
That's 10 years ago already. My goodness.
I was 65 then.
So now we'll take a look at the pot hanger up here. So maybe you just care to talk about it for a minute.
Well, we didn't have enough cupboard space. So I made this here pot rack. I'm not the first one to make them. They were getting quite popular in the new homes at the time. And the cup rack, believe it or not, that's a piece of walnut from the walnut tree, and it was in the yard, and we had to take down because it was under the electrical wires. And walnut is white on the outside and it turns brown with age, so every year it gets older, the brown area in the center of the walnut gets larger, and you see this pure white walnut, and people don't believe me that it is so.
Okay, so now on the table right in front of you, I see some little water animals.
Well, as one of these here was made by a fellow down, I know his name, he belongs to the guild, at least he did. That one there was made by a fellow that lives down on the Iowa border. And I had him make one for me, and I exchanged a piece of cable for a cable knife for that little bird. He was making a ton of meal. He make one of those in about 20 minutes.
Wow. And what's the stock for those small ones, Ollie?
Just a piece of flat iron about 1/8 of an inch thick, or maybe 3/16. I doubt if they were a quarter. And so you pounded them flat and thin, and then you cupped them, and to make this part, left a little bit out for the tail, and then you put stretch this out and shape it, and then punch a little eye on each side and try to put a line for the bill. And this here was copied from the one that Bob and Mary Fidel have, that an old blacksmith made at Flagstaff, Arizona, when we went down there for the national conference. And the old fellow died about 2 years after that, but the one that he made was all one piece. Mine isn't. Mine, I pieced it together and used a welder to put it together.
Very nice. What's the little guy sitting in front of him?
The little owl,
Yeah.
that there was for, if I wanted to put it on top of a fireplace set that I'd want to decorate with, use it for a decoration on a fireplace set, or handle on one of the pieces that went with the fireplace set.
What kind of stock is he made of?
I think it's just a piece of cold rolled steel about 3 inches long.
And so it's solid?
It's solid.
Okay. The knife and fork that are in back of the owl and the swan.
These were a present to my wife. They're made out of quarter-inch steel, and they're shaped, cupped, and even curved in the handles. It isn't going to show up on there, I don't think, but to increase the strength. And then to make the tines, I cut a slit. I take the tine and bend it this way, pound it to the shape I want, bend it back, take the next one, bend this one over, shape it, and bend it back, and do that on all 4 of them, so that you get this little loop in the center of each one of the tines. And this is done where I took a piece of iron pipe and heated it, and I pounded in the center of it, and then I used that for a die to pound this here down. It's full of hammer marks all over, but that I wanted in there so that it looked handmade.
Sure.
And then these here were my wife's protection. If a stranger knocked on the door, she went to the door with either the spoon or the fork behind her back. And if they came in, they were going to get hit on the head with either one of those implements.
Wow.
And now I see there's a candle holder there to your right
Yes.
with 3 legs. That looks like an interesting connection at the bottom.
Well, these here, I had to or gas weld them together because I couldn't hold 4 pieces in one hand at the same time. And these here are forge welded on up here, and then the rose is similar to the other roses that I make. And where the piece here is, this here was a 1/2 inch diameter, and then I drill a hole into it, and then I put a bolt in here that holds the rose together and is threaded into this back part to hold the whole rose together.
Okay.
There's probably 40 hours in that.
Wow. Yes, that certainly looks like a lot of...
There's at least an hour and a half just getting it to look straight.
Why, sure. How do you make your candle cups, Ollie?
I use a piece of 3/4 inch electrical conduit, heat them up, and then I use a ball from either a very large bearing, something about 1 inch ball, and I drive that down in the center, or else a big ball peen hammer will work also. And I keep rolling the top over until I get about 5/16 to 3/8 rollover, and then I just mark it with a chisel, and that also gives the taper. I have a tapered punch that I put in there so I can taper the whole thing up. I taper it before I start rolling the top over.
Okay, and then finally, for what's on the table here, I see a little pot holder here.
Well, this here is made out of one piece. So when I start with the leaf because that there's the most likely piece to be broken off. So I make the leaf, then I take and draw this out, keep drawing it out to where it is dainty enough to look right. And then I curve this part, or I usually have this here straight, I should say. I split it from here to here, and then I work it over the horn of the anvil to make the round ring, and then I just bend it up this way. Then I can hold this in the vise. I put my twist on, then I hold it up here in the vise and put my next twist on, and then I put the rest of the bends in it.
Okay.
And the weight is off from the center so that it doesn't tip over backwards, unless I get it. This here will cause it to overbalance, but otherwise it stands up pretty straight.
Very good. Okay. Now I think we could go out into the shop, and would kind of like to take a tour of the shop and see what you use for tooling and why. And I bet you while we do that, we'll probably run into some other projects that you've done over the years or maybe are in progress right now.
This is a forge I bought at an auction, and I got the base for it, and then I got a nice fire pot in it, so I used that. And I really like this forge because it's big, it holds a lot of coal, and it produces a lot of heat in a short time. The blower on this here is the one that I took home from the shop where I used to work at Clearlocks because they no longer had a blacksmith shop there. And it's the original motor on it. And my fire pot is set up in such a way that I've got this here, I turn to open the air. This is closed. This is wide open. When I close it and I turn the blower on, I can put a Kleenex on top of the fire pot and it won't blow the Kleenex off. Well, this is one that I bought, I don't know, somebody I think gave me this here top half. I think it came from one of the farmers I knew. And then I managed to pick up a fire pot for it. And this again has the same type of setup for the blower that I can open and close it with the gate here. And this was solid across the top, and what would they call it, a little riveter's forge or something, and it only had a few holes in it. So I drilled holes all the way around, and it broke the piece out, piece of cast iron out, and then I put the fire pot in, put fire clay around it, and gives me a good forge. I like this for demonstration because it's so light I can take it out to wherever I'm demonstrating. And I can put long pieces through that little window in the back if I need to. And it's a real handy forge for when I go out and demonstrate. This is the one that caught fire on the way home from
Denmark that time.
Denmark show, and you had a hunk of horn at me to put the fire out. This I got from a fellow who died. Got it from his wife, I should say. And he died, and she kept it for about 2 years, and then she decided to get rid of it. So I bought this here. I bought a 200-pound anvil. I bought 2 vices from her, about 200 pounds of coal, and some other odds and ends things that I got from her. But this one I don't have hooked up to electric. But I can hook it up quite simply to hook it up to electric with a small motor if I need to. Now this one I made comparatively recently. Who gave me this? But I think the bottom I got from Jim Hemming, and then I built all I got was just this part here. I put all the rest of this on, and so this is a real good forge. It's equal to the one over there. It has a good big fire pot, and does a good job of heating. And there again, this controls the speed or the amount of air that you need, and it does the same as on that first one that we looked at. And this one here also is one that somebody brought back to me. They got disinterested in blacksmithing, and they had bought it, and then they brought it back, so I gave them a few bucks for whatever I owed them, and I use this here for. And of course, the main reason of having all these forges is when I have a class of 8, and I get a couple of helpers, maybe 2 or 3 helpers with myself, then everybody can be forging at the same time, and then we get a bunch of anvils set up here and some tables with the tools on, and we can start out at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we talk and get all the directions. By 10 o'clock the forges are lit. By 4 o'clock everybody can be going home with hammer or whatever project that we were doing on that particular day. And especially on the hammer, that's quite an accomplishment for them to make their own hammer in one day. But over the period of years, I sharpened over 5,000 weld bits. We'll go into the shop now and take a look at some of the things that are being done here. Not being done either way. Well, when I was working for Gerlach Service, there was another young fellow that was working there. His mother had gone down to Texas, and she got sick down there, so he needed some money and wanted to go down and see her. So this was his dad's welder, and his dad was dead. So it actually was his welder at that time, and he needed some money to go down to Texas, so he asked me if I'd buy the welder. I says, yeah. I said, what do you want for it? He says, 50 bucks. Well, the welder was probably made in the 1920s. It's all copper wiring, and I've been using it since 1960, and it hasn't changed a bit in its capacity, all the way up to 285 amps down to 20 amps. This is a cutoff grinder that I made. Got large wheels, and I've got a vise here that I rigged together, and I can put a piece of steel in there, and then I can cut it off by I'm going to throw a few sparks here so that people can see what Well, it comes in handy sometimes.
You bet.
But where you want a square cut, and it does a pretty good job. Then I happen to accumulate a group of anvils now recently. I've got 7 here. There's 4 here, and there's 1 there. Those are for sale. And then the one that's sitting over by the window, that one is not for sale. And there's one that's outside by one of the anvils, that's not for sale. Those are my general working anvils. I have refrigerators here, which make it kind of handy for filling in with all the nuts and bolts and pieces of iron, pulleys, bearings, gloves, and whatever else I can think of that's stacked up in there. And then I have other parts over here for the iron and nails and what have you. This is a flower stand that would be put on a patio or something, or you have some plants that you want to set on these here leaves, and just for decorative. This here piece is comes around here, around this way. It was wrapped around a pipe in order to get these here circles, and then it was flattened down there to make the base. It's all one piece from here up to here, not counting the flower on the end. And up there is that Denmark show on that piece of wood that you and I attended that year.
So it was 1984.
I think that's what it was. A fellow came in here, he said, I've never seen so many tools in all my life. He says, how many tools have you got in here? I says, 3,000, 4,000, I don't know. But the snake is not a tool.
Where'd the snake come from?
My nephew had it, and they use them for scarecrows out in California. We went to Flagstaff, Arizona, for the Urbana conference. He stuck that in my bed. We got up early that morning and went to bed late, and I was so tired I didn't pay any attention. I just got into the bed and went to sleep. In the morning he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't say a thing. I didn't know I had a snake in bed with me. This grinder is all handmade, except I got the parts and put them all together. And I have different stones all the way up to about 14 inches to put on here. And it has a lot of power, and it really does a nice job of grinding. This is a bottom grinder, and just hooked up with a motor and very fine stones so that I can use it for sharpening twist drills.
How fine is fine?
Well, the smaller drills, I don't know the grit size on them, but the finer the stone, the smaller bit you can drill, that you can sharpen.
Okay.
Because it turns so fast that on small bits, it's done before you hardly know that you've touched it. I'm going to hold the bit this way between these 2 fingers and my thumb. I'm going to rest my finger here on the steady rest, turn the switch on to the grinder, and now I'm going to start to grind, and I'm going to touch it back there, and then I don't move my right hand at all. I just take the left hand and hit this up until it goes sparks off in the front, and then back down again. I don't move my right hand. I turn it around this way, come back up, and put it there, and back down, and I should have a pretty good job of sharpening that bit. Now I'm going to check it by looking through the window into the blue sky out there and see if the distance is the same length from here to the point and from here to the point. Then I've got a very close to a 60-degree angle.
Using these 2 nuts which you welded together, because they have 2 60-degree angles, and included they'd be 120, huh?
Yep.
Good.
Did you get in there already, Chippy? Come on, the girls want to see you too.
So we're looking at a
Right back
fireplace
again.
set that Ollie built, and just to give you an example of one of the pieces, here's the boom, and you can see the basket, an open basket with a partially unopened piece to it to give it an additional effect. Okay, now let's look at the other pieces, Ollie, in the same way.
I'm getting my elbow on this.
Okay, and the shovel again.
Want me to turn it?
Yes. Okay, the next piece.
You want to get the backside?
Okay, the back of the shovel, and you can see that the band is riveted on, right, Ollie?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, next piece. Oh, wow, these are fancy tongs.
Want it open?
Yeah. Great, box joint. Okay, thank you. Next piece. Okay, the poker. And again, continuing the basket motif and the hook end. Okay, Ollie.
And we started with the broom, didn't we?
Yep. And then, of course, the stand. Could you rotate the stand one whole time or half a turn around for me, please? Great. And another quarter turn. Great. Boy, that's quite a fireplace set. How long did it take to make that, Ollie?
I have no idea the hours that I got into it. I know that I'd want $1,000 for it if I sold it, because you go down so many blind alleys that you turn around and come back. There's 76 pieces in this here.
Wow. Wow, that's great.
Now, this is not welded on, this little top knot. The iron is pounded away from it by drilling a hole in a piece of iron and then pounding it down this way to swell this up and shape it. This wasn't opened at the time that you make this part. Then afterwards I open this up after this is finished. I made 3 of these pieces here before I found one I liked. So the one that holds it on, there's a hole from the bottom and a bolt goes up into here to hold the base on. And on the eagle head, without putting feathers on the head, it really looks like a bald eagle. You can't tell if it's a snake or an elephant or what it is. But by putting the feathers up here with this tiny chisel that is not perfectly true to, it's 1/16 of an inch or 32nd of an inch one way and down to nothing the other way to get a look of feathers. I even welded his tongue in his mouth in there, but it might be hard to see on the... I did that by lifting this part up and putting that part down, welding the piece in with a acetylene welder, and then pushing this back down and pulling that back up to normal view.
Wow.
Getting all the baskets equal in size was difficult. One of the things that I learned in doing it was by taking a piece of pipe and sliding it over this part and put a tiny tack weld, putting another piece up to here, a piece of pipe, and tack welding it, twisting it one way, then back twisting it, and I could get all of these equal. So all 5 of these here are almost identical.
Great.
This is 6 pieces here of 1/4-inch rods, and then there's a little stub 1/4-inch that goes up inside of here and one down here, so as when you're forge welding it, that it doesn't keep changing shape, and you have to have it in a rounded shape. So I've got 6 pieces and then 1 piece down the center like this, and then I've just arc welded enough to hold it together, then it's forge welded, and this is drawn out of that, and this is drawn down this way, and it's spliced together somewhere around in here. It's spliced together right here.
Wow.
This is a feature that I've had, which is pretty well liked, because whenever you burn these up, you can just go to the local drugstore or hardware store and get another whisk broom put in there without having to try to straighten up or trying to buy another broom for it made out of plastic. One of the things when you're making animal heads, now all animals that prey on other animals, dogs, cats, wolves, any of the other animals that, bears and so forth, their eyes set in a different position than animals like deer and horses, birds. Now, an eagle's eyes point straight ahead. A robin's eyes are on the side of their head, so they can just barely turn their head a little bit one way or the other, and they can see their tail. They know if there's any danger coming up behind them. The birds and the animals who prey on others, they don't worry about being attacked. They're worried about getting their next meal in front of them. So their eyes focus directly dead center, and they focus on their prey by triangulation, the same as we do. By looking this way at something, you can tell how far away it is, and they do the same thing. But now this dog, he's got 3 sets of eyes before I found a set that matched the head the way they should be. They'd either be too high, too low, too far out, too far in, or crooked. So it takes quite a bit of time to get them to. This iron doesn't stay hot all the while I'm talking about it either. It cools off rather quickly into small pieces. The base, the 4 legs, are 1 piece of iron, 2 inches wide, 1/4 inch thick, 22 inches long. Then it is split, like if you put these 2 together this way, it's split from here up, and the same way on the other side, and then they're spread out, and then I've got a tool on the anvil that I put in there, and it has kind of a cup shape, and then I have a top, what we call top and bottom fullers, and then I take a top fuller and I pound on it when the piece is red hot, and it puts the curve in there.
Very good.
It's riveted together here. These pieces are all riveted together right in here. You're going to have one rivet up here, the other rivet down there, otherwise they'll cross in the center and be cut off. So you have to kind of account for that, so you don't, so you get it on there true and straight, and they're all of them at approximately the same height. This is that 7-piece basket, and there's one piece goes down in the center there, and one piece comes up in here, and then it's forge welded, and then it's welded from here to up. Well, this here can be all the way up from here to the top. So this is just a piece in between here, about this long, that piece on there. So altogether it comes up to about 76 pieces. When I was blacksmithing at Gerlach Service at the shop where I was, before I retired, I think we had 4 pairs of tongs, but we did pretty much the same work all the time, and I never felt that I needed any more than that at the time. And then after I got retired and I started in artwork, everything was of different sizes. So I had to have different tongs for the different sizes, or I had to readjust the tongs to fit the piece. Well, that's a nuisance to have to heat it up and fit it for this piece of work, then heat it up again until you change to a different piece of work. And the reason for that is if it's too big, it's not going to fit a small piece of iron. You're not going to be able to pick it up. It's going to fall out of the tongs. Or if its tongs are too small, you're not going to be able to pick up a big piece. When I make hammers, it's impossible to hold a hammer with a pair of tongs. So I want a handle or just a piece of iron on the one end of it, and then by doing that you can hold that piece, you shape the hammer completely, and then you just cut it off and then grind the end flat where it was attached to the head of the hammer. So far I've probably either assisted or made about 150 hammers.
Wow. Okay, so you've got a number of pairs of tongs here. We counted them a little while ago. How many were there?
I think there's somewhere in the 40s.
Okay. Are there any particular ones that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I've got some that were given to me by a fellow that I'd gone to school with years ago, and he didn't have any use for them, so he gave some to me. And his dad was a blacksmith, and he did excellent work. The work that he did, some of the tongs look like they're bought and made in a factory because of the design was so good and the quality of the workmanship was so good. So he would make tongs, and I think his initials are on here. And these are handmade tongs, but if you look at them close, they almost look factory made. So I got several of those from him. And then I think this is another set that he had made. This picks up small round stock. And so there's it shows in here that it's bent. And then also what is nice is being bent, you can pick up a long piece of iron and have it go by your hand back here. You don't have to pick it up by one end. You can pick it up any place along a piece of iron, which makes it a lot easier. And this was a pair of tongs that he had made. And then I needed another pair of a different size, so I made one similar to the ones that he had made. Mine are nowhere near as well made or as good looking as his. So then I have some more tongs over there, the big tongs that I might use for heavier equipment. Well, this is a pair of tongs for picking up weld bit. These are two-man tongs, incidentally. They don't, one person can't pick up a bit with a pair of tongs like this. You've got enough problem just picking up the tongs. I don't know what they weigh, but they probably weigh about 12 pounds.
Wow. That's quite a display. Can we continue our way working around your workbench here and look at what other tooling you have and why?
I have a lot of pieces of scrap iron, which looks just like scrap iron to anybody else, but they have to be tools when you use them a number of times. I have approximately 150 to 200 chisels here, between these here and some that are over there on another workbench. Now, some of these are factory-made tools, but then I'm just recalling just the chisels and the punches and that sort of thing in here. Of course, there's files and the reamers, and I make all the different chisels with different radiuses on the half moon, and because a lot of times I've made some chisels that I probably only used once in my lifetime, but I had to have that chisel in order to do the job the way I wanted it done. One of the things I do, and I had this in the Metalsmiths some time ago, a year or so ago, is taking hacksaw blades and grinding off the end. They're used hacksaw blades. I grind off the end, but there's 2 inches of the end of the hacksaw that is not used at all because the frame is in the way. So I take those and I cut them off about 4.5 inches long, put them between 2 pieces of plywood, or this happens to be some other kind of wood, put glue on it, both sides, put the blade in, put it in the vise, squeeze it up nice and tight and leave it overnight, and the next morning you've got a really good sharp scribe to scribe the mark. This one broke loose on me, so it's kind of free, but you can scribe a mark, and when that one gets dull, you just grind it back one tooth and you got a sharp tooth again. When I was making snow buckets, and I'd want to pull pieces of iron together, and this is just a simple method of showing how I did it, but I could pull with enough chain, I could pull these snow buckets, which is pretty heavy equipment and pretty heavy iron that I was bending, and pull it in any direction I wanted to with this here. And by tightening this up, I'll have to get a wrench here to tighten it up. And I can get tons of pressure on this here.
Wow. That's great. And so,
I'd have these here chains up to 8 or 10 feet long sometimes to go around a whole snow bucket that had been almost turned inside out, and then I'd have to pull all the pieces together and then weld them. But you couldn't heat it all at one time, so by pulling it and having about 3 or 4 of these different pullers, I could put them in different places and put tons of pressure on a piece of metal that to pull it back into its position.
this is an auction poster I see here. It's dated April 9th, 1960,
Yeah.
and it says Ollie Juaire. Okay.
Here I thought I was rich with all that. I had over $25,000 worth of stuff.
Wow.
These are some hammers I made for jewelers. I think the first one I made was a set for Marcia McEachron. And I made a setup like this. These are valves from Briggs & Stratton motor. And I've got a hole in the end here and a hole here, and I can put this into this hole and tighten it up with my little Allen wrench. And now they reduce these here by putting them down on a piece of silver or copper, whatever they're working, and then they tap it from the top. Now I had all different shapes of these here. Some were square, some were oval, some were round, and that way they could pick out whatever tool they wanted to make a square box. They could make nice corners in the box with these here little hammers, and they could change the box in every direction they wanted to go. The handles I made, turned them on a wood lathe, and this was made out of a shaft that big around, cold rolled steel, and of course they weren't being used for heavy pounding, so they aren't tempered, but they were different shapes. So they could use this here in a place like this. Did you get it? And so you could use this here to hit the other pieces when they were shaping things. So these are all the little tiny hammers that I had made over the years. And then I started making bigger hammers as they became, making the first ones for myself, and then gradually teaching classes and making hammers so that anybody could make them. Now the others that I have over there, those are factory made, but these are all handmade hammers. This is one of the first hammers I made. These two, and I don't know if this one is. This was made in 1983. These are the first, what we might call a blacksmith hammer. Those are the first 3 that I made. And then when some of the people saw them, they wanted hammers too, so then I started making them for them. Then I started having classes of up to 8 people, and starting at, I'd have 4 forges here. Some others would bring forges along and bring anvils, so we had enough to go around. And then they'd start in the morning, and everybody, when they went home in the afternoon, everyone had a hammer that they made themselves. Probably not the handle in it, because that takes almost as long to put the handle as it does to make the hammer. Oh, he travels quick. He doesn't want to tame real well. I've had some that in 2 days, they would come and eat out of your hand. This one doesn't do that. He just won't.
Well, he's hiding out right here. I got a good shot of, look at him. He just about came back in just even now. So he's fairly gutsy.
This hammer here, in fact, these 3 are some of the first hammers I made outside of a little jeweler's hammer I made for Marshall McEtron. So, looking at these here, this is a 3 3/4 pound hammer made in 1982. And maybe I haven't got the dates on all of them. This here one was made in 1981.
And how much did that one weigh, Ollie?
It's probably about 4 or 5 ounces. And this one here is 1983, and this is 1 1/4 pounds. Now, I had said this was handmade, but it wasn't handmade by me. I think it was handmade by another blacksmith at some time or other that was left at the shop when old George Marty quit, and I took this hammer home. So that there is what they called a nailer's hammer for making nails, from the way I understood it. And this is one that I made for getting into corners where I wanted to pound a corner flat into a box or something. I could do it with that. And then where I wanted to do some other shaping. This got a rounded shape, but it's not very hard as a soft hammer, so it gets nicked up easy. But this hammer doesn't, and this is old. This has got to be at least 70, 80 years old. And this is where I started making both left and right-handed hammers. Now this one here happens to be a left-handed hammer, so that you can hold it like this. I'll go over here by the anvil so that you can see how it is used. You tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Now if I was left-handed, you hold the piece of iron like this, and when you pound here, and you move your iron back and forth, but you hit the same spot all the time with your hammer. And you move this back and forth, and the way I do that is by rotating my hips, keeping my knee here so that I'm sure that I'm going to hit the same spot all the time. Now with a right-handed hammer, which I'm more comfortable with, I think this is the left one too. Here is right. Now I'm more comfortable with it this way because I'm right-handed. So I can hit in the same place all the time and just move my iron, and it's nice for drawing out this way. And that is the object of it, that you can draw the iron out that way. Then it's rounded slightly on the other end, and it's not tempered very hard because I'm working real hot iron with it most of the time, so I'm not pounding cold iron with it. Now, this big one that I showed you, this is one hammer that was made in 1982. I don't know what the piece of steel is, but I tempered it perfect. And it's one of the few that gets tempered perfect. But since I use it a great deal, and there's hardly no nicks on it on either end, and it hasn't been redone or anything else. Hockey stick for a handle on that one. And I quit using the hockey sticks when I started making bigger hammers, and then I couldn't get a hold of good sticks either. So now I buy the handles by the box. There's 10 in a box, and I buy the highest quality handles that I can get. And this here has got 2 different radiuses. One radius here and a different radius on this side. So for some fancy work you might want to work to a certain point and it doesn't do the job anymore, you can flip it over and do the rest of the work at the other side of it. And then this here was more like a cut-off chisel that I can use for cutting pieces of metal. That's why it has just a short handle on it. You don't pound with it, you put it down and you strike. And this is approximately the same thing, because you don't strike with this one, but you use it to get inside of a box where you want to cut something, or you can work with it into deep holes and that sort of thing. I don't know if I've shown this here many times of having people guess how long it take me to make a chisel. And after we would be through working for the day, I'd take one of these here and say, well, you write down how long it's going to take me to make a chisel, and they'd put it on a slip of paper and hand it to one person, and then have somebody time me with the second hand on a watch, and I'd heat this here, and I say, you start timing me from the time I hit the anvil with my piece of iron. And then when I do, you start counting the minutes or the seconds, whatever it takes, to where I'm finished, and I temper it. So far, my fastest time of pounding it out, shaping it, cutting the end off, and tempering it is 21 seconds.
Wow. That's great.
If you drop it, you've lost 5 seconds. I have been doing some welding on a tractor where it was broke under the front axle. So I welded it, and then I wanted to take some of the rough edges off, and I got down on my knees to take the rough edges off, and I got a cramp in my leg. I grabbed a cramp in my leg, and I reached to grab this here. I took my finger off the trigger of the grinder, but the grinding wheel with this high momentum kept on going, and I turned it like this. I cut this through a heavy work shirt, through the cuff, through the button, and into this bone, and cut this cord so that the cord went up into here, and the other part of the cord went down here. Now, it hurt just about as much as if somebody would take their fingernail and scratch you. There's no pain in the cords, and all it hurt was just where it went through the skin and along here. So I went up to the front and I said, I think I'll have to go to the doctor and have it taken care of. So I went like this because that cramp come back in my leg. He thought I'm passing out. Well, he's passing out, I'm not passing out as that damn cramp came back. So they took me to the hospital, and there happened to be a specialist there that worked on this sort of type of accident. He reached up inside, hooked this cord and pulled it down, reached down this side and pulled the cord up, tied the two together, and they grew properly. I had my arm in a sling for a while so that it wouldn't move this thing, so I had my arm straight out. But I worked every day, just that I had to do more work with my other hand, and I have no problems with it. The hand works fine and everything else. But without that doctor, I would have had a real crippled arm.
So, Ollie, this is a friend of yours who comes to visit. How does he take to blacksmithing?
He don't like the noise.
He doesn't like the noise, huh?
No.
Uh-huh.
And he isn't the most friendly one I've had. I've had some that would eat out of my hand after 2 days, but this one doesn't want to get that close to me. He'll eat all that, he'll pick up all that wheat. He'll eat what he needs for his meal, and then he's hauling it someplace, and I think he's hauling it about 3 different places where he's burying it.
Yeah, it's clear he's not chewing on it. He's just, his cheeks are getting fatter and fatter.
If you look at him, pretty soon you can hardly walk over him. See how fat they're getting around the cheeks? When he gets his mouth full, pretty soon he'll take off and go. He goes around the shop, either this way around or around that way. And of course I lose track of him because he gets under boards and everything else, so I don't know where he's at, but comes back in a little while. chipmunks are a lot easier to train than striped gophers. Striped gophers won't train very easily, but chipmunks will. Well, I used a forge like this recently, and being it's only about 3 inches deep, it was very difficult to do a forge welding in it because you just didn't have enough heat coming up from the bottom. By turning more air on, didn't seem to solve the problem, it just scaled the iron up more. You really needed a deeper fire pot. So the one that I was using was almost identical to this one, and had a hand crank blower on it. And what I'm going to do with this one, I've got a cow's drinking cup that farmers use in the barn for watering their cows. And a little paddle that's in here with a spring loaded, and when the cow pushes down on the paddle, the water comes up from the bottom, the cows drink, and when they take their nose out, the water stops. Well, they're cast iron, and I'm hoping to make a much deeper fire pot with this. I'm going to, this here ends up to being about 5 inches high. I'm going to put a ring around here to raise this part up, and that way I can get a good supply of coal in there and have a good deep fire pot, which she should be able to forge weld with either coal or charcoal. I'm going to try to talk her into using charcoal because of the location that she's at in town. It might be more compatible with the neighbors than coal for her, burning coal. So I do want to hook it up with electric. This little hand crank blower that I have on it is nice, but I try to get away from hand cranking as much as possible. You can accomplish a lot more work if you just push an on-off switch and watch your iron instead of having to crank all while you're there. You can also walk away from it and still have iron air blowing on your piece of iron enough to get it hot without having to watch every second of it. You can walk away from it and come back and the thing is still going and heating. Well, I'm going to explain how I repair these anvils that come in and what I do to them to make them look nicer and to be more workable than when they were brought in. Many of the anvils that are so badly beat up, and it's usually not the original blacksmith that bought that anvil, but his son and his grandsons that beat on it with sledgehammers just to hear it ring or just to try to pound a piece of cold iron that's two inches wide and a ½ inch thick and trying to straighten it or bend it, either one. And they would bruise up the anvil pretty bad. After I get through with them, and I grind the sides on this side and on the other side, and then I fill in a lot of this here dings of bad chip marks in there. Then I grind this into a radius, and I grind a different radius on this side and on the back side. I weld all of this up to be perfectly square before I grind it. And then on this one I will probably put an extension onto the horn to make it look a little nicer. Not that it helps anything, but it does make it a little easier to work when you're making scrolls and that sort of thing with where the smithing blacksmith or horseshoers, they weren't so worried about the looks of their material. It was just to get the job done, get it right, and put the shoes on the horse and get them back out in the field where he could do some work. But in artwork, we're trying to work with pieces of metal that we don't want misshapen parts or blemishes into it. So we try to get the blemishes out of the anvil and try to keep from putting them in the iron with our hammers so that we don't have to do the job over again, or we got some bad looking marks on it. And it's one of the reasons that we do it. Also, it increases the value of the anvil by probably 50%. When they're finished, I can get a lot more money for a finished anvil after I've worked on it and had made the horn longer and had it all polished and everything. The processes are to start to grind it, and I use a level to check for the high spots, both on the face of it here and going crossways. I'll probably, then I start welding up these corners. If there's a high spot, I grind them down. So if they're real low spots, I'll weld them up and try to get the top as level as possible. Only thing I do want is 1/16 of an inch sway to it in the center, so when you lay a piece of iron onto the top and you hit it with a hammer, it will go down into that 1/16 of an inch cavity, come back up a little bit, and it'll be straight. If this is perfectly straight and the piece of iron is bent this way slightly and you hit it, it goes down as far, but it comes back, it's still bent. But by having this concaved a little bit, it goes down, comes halfway up, and there it's going to be straight for you. You don't have to hit very hard, you just have to hit in the right place. And so there's how I check the anvil this way with a square, and this way I look underneath and see how much space there is underneath here. If it has a 1/16 of an inch or so, fine. If it's got a hump in it, then I grind the hump out. I do like to have the horn come up to the same level as this, so all 3 points touch the square at the same time. It'll touch here, here, and here. So on this one here, I'm going to do some work on it. I'm going to extend the horn a little bit and weld it up so that it comes up a little bit higher. And another thing that does, keeps your iron from sliding off the tip of the horn when you're working. And so it helps hold it on where what you're doing. Here's a 70-pound anvil that I bought a year ago. And here the sides were good, and here it was nice. I had to clean it up a little bit. It's rusty now because of the very damp weather. And the next thing I'm going to do now is to do like I was referring to. I'm going to put this on so that the horn is here, and I'm going to weld from here back to here so I get a nice gradual point that is symmetrical with the rest of the anvil and make it look better. Not only that, it's easier to work on, because if you want to make small scrolls, you can't do it where it's big. You have to do it where there's a smaller point to make the scrolls to the size that you want. This one has a very small Pritchell hole, but for the type of work that this would be used for, it's plenty big enough. And also this here hardy hole, it would make hardy tools for holding and doing many different things, is the use of the hardy hole. After this one I don't have to do much grinding on like some of the others that I do. The only large amount of grinding I'll have to do is after I weld all this up, is grinding from here to get that nice gradual taper to the horn.
Would you explain the process of adding that ring on there that you talked about earlier, Ollie?
I'm going to get a different ring if I can. I'm going to put a ring on here when I start to weld. And the object of it is that I want to start always from the same point, and then weld this up and weld and go all the way around and keep going around until I have the same all the way to the point. This makes the anvil look a lot nicer and is handier to work when you're making certain scrolls and different phases of blacksmithing that you'll be doing on it. So I would like to have a chance to show one that is finished, but right now I don't have any others in the shop that have that I've done to and have them still here in the shop. They're out where they were sold.
Would you talk a little bit about the kind of welding rod that you use for anvil repair?
I use a 6011 rod for a lot of the buildup, and say, well, that's too soft. Well, I use 7018, which is a harder rod, which I put on the corners here. I'll put some 7018 rod, but only when the anvil is hot from grinding. So if I'm going to have to weld on these here corners, I do all the grinding first. The friction of the grinding wheels get this up to maybe 200, 250 degrees where it's uncomfortable to touch. Then I can weld on here, and as this cools and the weld cools, they'll cool at about the same speed so they don't peel off. One other thing I do is I cut about a 15-degree angle off from the back here, and then I use that for a cutoff tool. So I can take a small piece of iron or flat stock, and I can put it on here. I can hit it, turn the piece of iron over, hit it, put it in the vise, wiggle it a couple of times, and cut it off. When I do it this way, and you have a hardy tool here, I cut my hands on the hardy tool, not paying attention, and cutting my knuckles on it. So I very seldom use a sharp hardy tool in any of my anvils. People do, and many of them have gotten by with it for years, but after you hit your knuckles on it once or twice, you try to find a different solution.
Here's
It's big that sometimes people want, and this one don't fit this here hardy hole, it's too big here, but you can get an idea of what we use it for. And when I want to make little tiny scrolls, you can make 1/8-inch scrolls here on the end of the bick, and I'll turn it so that you can get a better idea of the diameters of the bick. Here is about 1 inch and 5/8, 1 inch and 3/8, and the 1.5 inches, and this one here is about the widest is about 1 inch. These fit. These ends are 2 different sizes. One fits my 114-pound anvil. The other one fits the 137-pound anvil. Someone who would be beginner blacksmith, they want to take up blacksmithing and for a hobby or for a profit, is to find someone that knows what they're doing and learn from them. Trying to do it all on your own, you make so many mistakes and go up so many blind alleys wondering why it didn't work and not knowing why, because it's just trial and error until you finally find something that works. In the meantime, you probably get disgusted and quit. There are so many different things to blacksmithing that you have to learn that in intricate parts it become very simple once you learn how. Otherwise, it can be a nightmare trying to get some of the things to work the way you want them to. I have given demonstrations up at Bemidji where I spent most of my time just talking to them, answering questions. I could be answering questions while I'd be working and explaining why I was doing the things that I was doing and what would work and what wouldn't work. How to set up to find center of a piece and things like that. How to sharpen drill bits so that when you drill gets dull that you can sharpen it properly so that you don't have to throw it away and buy another one. I train them how to find center on a piece that you want to find the center of it so that you can drill a hole dead center. You can measure it sometimes, and if it's an irregular piece, you can work an hour and still drill your holes wrong.
What are you going to do, Ollie?
I'm going to make a chisel out of this here combine finger. They're not a real high carbon steel, but they're not a low carbon steel either. And I'd like to have people learn this. Yes, how long did it take me to make this chisel? To heat it, to shape it to the shape of the chisel, to cut the edge off, sharpen it, and temper it. How long did it go take?
About 15 minutes.
Okay. You only got one that did get, see, nobody else did, you can't lose, can you? How much do you say, Pete?
I don't know if I want to say, Ollie.
Okay.
I'll say, I don't know, a minute?
That'd take a little longer than that. That'd take a little longer than that.
Well, we'll find out.
This is what, from the time you hit it the first time?
Yeah. You got time to watch. From the time, I don't time while I'm heating. Only when I put it on the anvil. I got to change my anvil.
Can you time it there?
This video was shot during the summer and fall of 1995, while Ollie was still heavily involved in blacksmithing. Now it's the winter of 2002, and I've finally assembled it. Ollie has already been in a nursing home for a few years. He is suffering from Alzheimer's disease. He doesn't seem to remember any of us now, but from all reports, he is the healthiest guy in the place, which is mostly populated by ladies. He helps them around and is often seen taking 2 of them at a time to lunch, 1 on each arm. Thanks for watching, and thanks to his friends for caring about this most remarkable guy.